Yes, welcome back to Hot Topics. I'm Jeff Ajamai with Home Life Miracle and House of Trade, bringing you the most talked about real estate news stories of the week. And the first story of the day we're actually going to talk about is around illegal rooming houses in Toronto. So if you don't know what a rooming house is, I want you to picture this. Imagine you own a detached home. You've got, let's say, 4 bedrooms, 3 washrooms, 4 bedrooms are upstairs. You would take the 4 bedrooms and rent them each out to individual tenants. You would take your main floor, and have that divided into a couple different other rooms. You take your living room and divide that into a few rooms, your dining room, divide that into a few rooms, and maybe you have now 4 bedrooms on the main floor. So 4 up top, 4 on the main floor, and then basement done as well, another 4 bedrooms. You have 12 units there. 12 different tenants. That's not very safe. A lot of fire hazards and different problems that can arise from a rooming house like that, especially because it's not regulated. So that's what a rooming house is. They're illegal right now in the city of Toronto. Now, this story is brought to us by The Star, and it's going to be centered around one individual. His name is Ramalingam Sethu. He is a Sri Lankan immigrant that's been in the country for about 23 years. And over those 23 years, he's been in rooming houses for his entire life. Right now, he's about 66 years old, and through his pension, he makes about $1,400 a month. Half of that goes into the rent for his rooming house. And that should tell you just how big the affordable housing problem in Toronto is. For someone that's been here for almost a quarter century and they still can't find affordable housing, that's crazy. Now think for a second and imagine if these rooming houses were legal. They'd be regulated. They'd actually have to follow a mandate that would make sure that anyone that's living in that space or the landlord that owns that space is made sure to follow a certain set of guidelines to make sure that space is safe for their tenants. You can point back to a story that happened last year that I think a lot of news outlets covered, and that was around 18-year-old Helen Go. And she was a student at the University of Toronto in Scarborough, and she lived at 10 Hayda Court, that's near the University of Scarborough. And there were a bunch of other students that were living in that space as well. Fire broke out, she was caught in the building, she died. We don't want situations like that to happen, and that's a hazardous situation that a lot of people are in that are living in these rooming houses. So it's something to think about. It's something that's really worth a discussion. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the story. I think it's something that could even help landlords. If you're renting out 12 different rooms in your home for about $700 a month, you're easily covering your mortgage and whatever the other utilities and costs would be. So you would be cash flowing positive. So it could be something that would allow a lot of homeowners to add value to their property or add value to their investments. And it could be something that's somewhat of a solution for people that are looking for affordable housing, so long as it's under the proper guidance and regulations. So something to talk about. Leave a comment down below. It's a discussion. And the second topic of the day that I wanted to get into was around where first-time buyers are getting their down payment to fund their home purchase. And what the story tells us, and this is by Better Dwelling, they basically went and looked at the Toronto Real Estate Board's annual buyer survey, and what it shows is that many first-time buyers, at least 10%, are using funds from their current home to fund their down payments. Now you're gonna think, okay, how are you using funds from your current home to fund a down payment if you're a first-time buyer? It can mean one of two things. Either you're using equity from your family home, so you're living with your parents own a home in Brampton, for example, and they're agreeing to help you use equity from that property to put into your own property. That's a way to fund a down payment. It's a form of a gift. The only difference is that you're using a loan as your down payment. That comes with its own set of risks because likely you're only paying interest on that loan. Yeah, basically it just means that you have very little equity in the property. That's something that we can really discuss down the road because it can lead to a lot of other problems like we saw in the US housing market in 2008 when people didn't have much equity in their property. But it's something to consider if you're looking to buy your first home. The second thing would be is that they're not really first-time buyers. They're just using the title first-time buyer to benefit from some of the first-time buyer programs and credits that they would get. So for example, if you're living in Ontario, if you're a first-time buyer, you don't have to pay certain land transfer taxes for the first time. as a first-time buyer. Same thing applies if you're buying in Toronto. Certain land transfer taxes are waived for you as a first-time buyer. And as a result, that helps when you're trying to close your property because that's less cash coming out of your pocket. However, if you are already a person that owns real estate and you're using that moniker, you're trying to sell yourself or present yourself as a first-time buyer when you're buying or an investment property or another property, whatever, you're breaking the law. And likely many people have been caught trying to do this in the past. So it's not a strategy I would suggest doing just to benefit from a couple $1,000s in savings. Because like I said, many have been caught by the CRA. There's been reports that around $210 million was recovered from Ontario alone from April 2015 to September 2016 of people that tried to present themselves as first-time buyers and obviously really weren't. CRA is going to get their money. Trust me. They're going to make sure they get their money from you. This is the government. They don't play around when it comes to that tax revenue. So it's not a strategy I would use when it comes to pretending you're a first-time buyer if you're not. But it was a really interesting story because all this tells me is that people are willing to take on much higher risk when the incentive to buy real estate is high. And right now, and it has been for a long time, the incentive to buy real estate is high. Property values are up there. Over the long term, we know that real estate tends to appreciate. You might have 1 or 2 years of sales drops or price declines, but over the long term, 10, 20, 30 years, the trend line is usually going like this. So it's the majority of time a benefit to go and buy real estate. And when you see high incentives like we've seen in the market where you can buy property 1 year and then flip it and make about $100,000 in equity the next, you're going to take on a little risk to see if you can make some of that money. So that's the kind of environment we're in. It's something to pay attention to. Let me know what you think of the story down below. Comment. Once again, it's a discussion. Don't forget to check out the Mobile Age of Real Estate blog on our House of Trade website. That's houseoftrade.ca/blog. Check that out. Don't forget also check out the House of Trade application available for iOS and Android. Thank you for joining us on Hot Topics. We're going to see you next week. Peace.